So I wouldn't really recommend a full secondary build on the Ohio, especially in random battles. But since I've been having some reasonable success pushing in ranked, I thought I'd give some full secondary battleships a go, and Ohio seemed to work extremely well this game. We got a ton of secondary hits. Whether they're all valuable or not is another question, right? They don't exactly pen the most armor, right? Only 21 millimeters, so we're aiming for superstructures on a lot of ships, and of course it's pretty useful against some destroyers. We're going to aim for the Sherman here, since it seems like they're taking a more drawn-out fight, and this Austin is already in a pretty bad position, so only one hit, but that's still 1,500 damage, which is pretty good. I'm hoping that we can at least trade out our Shimakaze here, since, yeah, Sherman's pretty nasty against destroyers. Unfortunately, though, he does manage to go dark, although our secondaries are starting to get some more accurate hits on him. And for whatever reason, this Austin just decides to charge in. I'm worried, of course, about torpedoes here. This is my main worry. And I'm not shooting because he has his upper belt armor that's 32 millimeters. I'm waiting for an angle where I think I'm going to be able to citadel him and not bounce. Unfortunately, I didn't. I think I waited until like a 35-degree angle, something like that. So I'm not sure how that one didn't go through, but it didn't. And unfortunately, our Z takes a ton more damage because of that. But at least we do manage to take the Austin out, which is a good start, honestly. But the real show here is Ohio versus Schlieffen. At close range, you would think the Schlieffen is just going to walk all over me here, even though I have full HP. And he is going to do a ton of damage to me. But it's important to remember that Ohio just has better guns, right? And we have this amazing advantage in at least a little more drawn out fights of this fast cooldown heal. He has the advantage of these damage controls that he can just basically always repair his ship and not be on fire. So we're looking for hopefully a few fires to reset that damage control, and maybe we'll swap over to something like HE. Unlikely though, since our AP is doing reasonable damage, and since we can overmatch his bow, that's kind of where I'm aiming, right? I'm looking for that salvo into his bow that's going to be really good damage. His upper belt and belt armor is pretty thick, so we don't really want to aim there. Up into his superstructure, of course, we also want to be hitting. And at these ranges, our secondaries are actually going to do a lot of damage to this Schlieffen. And later on, yeah, we did a ton of secondary damage actually to this guy. And that's because we're hitting him in the superstructure. If you're playing in Ohio, you really want to maintain a little bit of distance. This 10 kilometers or so is about where you want to be for a secondary build Ohio. That's where the arcs of those secondaries are going to be plunging down and hitting other ships in the superstructure. Ohio, of course, has good accuracy, just doesn't have the pen, right? So that's where I think you're going to get the most value. Of course, at these ranges, it's also pretty good for the guns as well. Since, yeah, unlike the Slava we saw yesterday, the velocity is a bit of an issue here. And I should mention in this game, it is full secondary. I haven't got the aiming upgrade on the 6th slot here. It is the secondary module. I'm not even taking the extra upgrade to the guns reload, for example. I wanted to really try these full secondary battleships. For the Ohio, it does mean that sometimes you're going to get a little unlucky on the main gun's dispersion. Although, for whatever reason, it doesn't always have to be bad dispersion, even without that 11% accuracy, since this HE salvo is going to hurt. Yeah, that's about that's like a Thunderer HE salvo, right? 2 fires, over 10k damage, pretty nasty. Ohio has that potential, and it's always a good thing to keep in mind that a ship has good HE, so if you're not overmatching or if there's not a really great opportunity for armor piercing, just swap over to the HE, especially on Ohio, which has the American Special Commanders as an option. If you don't know, you can have the shell swap time reduced by 75% instead of just 50, although that might be changing with this next update where they're playing around a little bit with Expert Loader. I haven't looked fully into that yet, but it's seemingly going to buff the Italian battleships, which, honestly, I think they probably do need. I got a small hit into the DD there, not too much, but I am trying to help out since this is basically the win or lose kind of play here, where our DDs are just getting swarmed by, well, not only good gunboats. I wouldn't call a Summers a very good gunboat, but yeah, Smallland is terrifying, especially against a Shimakaze and a Gearing. And yeah, they're going to go down. So we need to charge in. I'm desperately trying to get into range to deal with them. We've already done pretty good damage, but remember, it's really all about cap zones and controlling the game that way that's going to win a lot of these ranked battles. So we do manage to catch this Yamato at least, again, focusing on the HE while he's angled and trying to light some fires. It's going to be a great way to get a ton of damage on an angled battleship, especially if we can pop his damage control and get some permanent fires here. But this is going to be a tricky game to win. We have to take this Yamato out quickly, and we somehow need to get into the other two caps without taking a ton of torpedoes. It's really going to rely on our Des Moines staying alive and getting into a position to radar. That's what it comes down to here. So I'm trying to just push out and hopefully be a bit of a distraction, and maybe our Des Moines can get a decent radar off. Potentially these DDs are going to get greedy to use these smokes to farm me, try and get some different torpedo salvos off on me. And sure enough, they do. Des Moines pops his radar, and I'll fully admit, this game would have gone very differently if these two destroyers hadn't thrown like they did. So the Småland on very low HP, the Des Moines takes him out right away, so I decide to focus on the Summers. And we get a decent hit in with the HE, but really importantly here, our secondaries are getting a few hits. The aim isn't perfect, of course. Against a kiting DD, it's a little tougher. Secondaries, if you didn't know, are much better against targets that are pushing towards you than people who are running away. For whatever reason, they just seem to hit a few more salvos. But we do manage to take him out with our final salvo, and that is pretty much going to secure this game, because there's really not much this Yamato can do at this point, because, I mean, he's probably not going to kill me unless he gets a really, really good shot into my citadel through the bow, but I'm taking a very specific angle where I'm trying to make it as difficult as possible to hit that citadel. The other thing I'm doing is I'm trying to push around the left side here so that my Des Moines has better angles to use AP. I used AP into the superstructure there, and that might seem like a bit of a weird choice, but this next salvo is going to show you why. At closer ranges or on ships with much bigger superstructures, looking at you, German battleships, there's a ton of damage to be had from AP full pens into the superstructure of these battleships. You can see our Des Moines is very much using armor piercing, which is just devastating. And yeah, 14k into his superstructure, it's pretty nuts. And while these secondaries aren't the most useful, hitting his belt here, we're getting a lot of fires, and it was enough for a Witherer even, which is pretty insane. So yeah, we ended up actually getting 500 secondary hits, which is an absolute ton. Not all of them were the most useful, but 14 fires? Ohio's a bit of a beast, and even with the HE, right? Look at that, 43k from the secondary is pretty good. And we managed to do 83k to that Schlieffen, and actually won in that close range brawl. And the reason I really say I wouldn't recommend this in random battles really comes down to the amount of players in randoms in the same map size. There's just not enough room to push so aggressively without getting punished extremely hard. As far as the build goes, this is what it looks like on the Commander. No IFHE here, since IFHE really only gets us up to 26 millimeters of armor pen on the secondaries, which really isn't worth it. It's much better to go for this fire chance. You can see 10% fire chance with this build, and a 2.4 second reload. And yeah, we get 10 barrels per side. So that's a lot of fire potential, as we saw. A Witherer out of mostly secondaries, a little bit of main guns in there too. Like I said, Gunfeeder is awesome on the American ships. And as far as equipment goes, yep, full secondaries, guys. I'm not using artillery prodding room, although I probably would recommend you do it. It's probably not worth investing so heavily into something so situational. But in ranked, I think it can work, and it was a ton of fun. I was playing some other battleships too with full secondary builds, sometimes like a Bourgogne full secondary. Of course, I had to try the Preußen and ships like that. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but there might be a few of those on the channel coming up. We'll see. But thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.